So I think the problem is that with the digital revolution, there is almost limitless opportunities to dive into your own past. And, I want to talk today about the trials and tribulations of doing just that, and the wealth of emotions that come up by looking at, where you used to be. Specifically, we're going to keep it in a creative context. Work you've worked on, maybe work you've published, or just work that you've kept to yourself. But, to make a comparison, I think everybody has photo albums of some kind. Everybody. But, I think it's a pretty common thing. And when it's a physical thing, you can print off your photos, properly print them off, and categorize, your shots, your events, who was there, who was not, put them into albums maybe, and present them, or at least keep them away so that one day they can be poured through. Now I say all these things as if they're regular practice, and that is because in my household it very much is. There's a lot of photo album management, whilst these things are happening, whilst we're in the times, but also, looking back and collating those things. And of course, photo albums, I'm talking about when we used to print off photos, when it was way more common to do so, at least, and you'd get them developed, not just printed off. So they needed somewhere to go, and so why not a really plasticky, sticky kind of book that allowed them to slot in neatly, and like I say, be well presented, but ultimately was sort of I just remember the crinkle of the sound of opening a photo album, because there's that layer of plastic itself over the photos, which are sort of themselves, plasticky of some kind. It's definitely not just regular paper, right? So the whole thing has a particular, texture and feel, and then there's sort of hand-scrawled notes as you go through the events and the occasions and the years. And that's wonderful. And when you get those books out, those albums, there's an opportunity for nostalgia, embarrassment. One of the best subreddits out there, I think, is Blunder Years, which really captures some of this energy that I'm talking about, where you just, you go through these photo albums looking for memories, and perhaps in your memory of that moment, you're as together and mature and well-dressed as you are in this present moment. But laid bare is the fact that no. In this moment in history, which has been captured forever, through this marvelous process of photography and then print and then amateur bookmaking at home, here is that time actually laid and writ large that you were not that cool at all, and your fashion sense was absolutely dire, and somehow, even though the people around you look very of the moment and well put together, and it doesn't look like fashion faux pas, somehow looking at your younger self in these scenarios, you're like, oh, I managed it. I took the same elements of the same era of fashion and style and behavior, and I managed to make a car crash out of them. But again, maybe you're looking around just you in the photographs. Maybe you're not as self-obsessed as me, and you're looking around yourself and you're reminded of the context and the moment you were in, and so on. And I'm not just talking baby photos here, right? I'm talking about photos from just long ago enough. Well, first off, long ago enough that they were printed for realsies, because that's still the reason a medium we're talking about. So long ago enough that they're from that era where we used to freaking do that. And like I say, my mum particularly was rabidly into this process. And I could probably tell you the years because she's got them written on the spine and everything. So I could tell you the years that this waned off, but just far enough in your own past as well that yes, your memory of it is clear and you feel like you were, if not a full-ass grown-up, then definitely not a child. And yet long enough ago that you're like, oh, I'm shocked by some element of what I'm seeing. Either, oh, look at that person's hair back then, or look at my own, as I say, style, vibe in general. Look at my own hair, relevant. And there's that layering of feelings, of nostalgia, that bittersweet sort of looking back into the recent past, knowing that it's past. There's the happiness of having experienced that moment, and there's the sort of the strange mix of embarrassment and pride, knowing that you're looking at a person who, yeah, they had their own shit going on. This younger version of you, they had stuff they had to work out to become who you are today. But at least what you're seeing is in the photo is the expression of themselves, yourself, your past self, and whilst you may be embarrassed to see that that's what you used to be bold about doing, and you may be embarrassed to find out that you used to think that was cool, it's a nice feeling to say, oh, at least I thought something was cool. And at least I wanted to put it out there, wear it on my sleeve, share my passion for fash with the world. There's pictures of me sort of holding up Lego, massive constructions that I've made, towers and bases and whatever, scenes of grand moments that I had narratively worked out. And I'm proud of what I've done, and I'm showing it off in the photo, and I've got a big grin on my face. And, you look at it now and you're like, well, you're a fucking idiot, because none of these Lego bricks even match. The color scheme's terrible. Why would the base be laid out like this? You total maniac. And you're probably, as you're grinning in this photo of the Lego, you're probably missing a few teeth as well. So it's just all round. There's that level of embarrassment, but it's still nice to look at it. And then, of course, because we're in the same generation, you and I, Facebook, right? I mean, and the others, okay? Too many to name, but obviously Facebook's the big whale. We rethought what photo albums were about, and it wasn't about this very highly curated moment to have the best of the best, committed to this increasingly expensive process of actually developing film. But, with digital camera, just spaffing out the entire contents of the memory. Did we used to have memory cards then? I feel like what I remember is digital cameras. You're having to plug them straight into the computer. And they're just doing bulk, the 110 photos of you embarrassing yourself, drunk, underage and drunk, on photos, hundreds of them, photographic evidence of crimes committed, immediately bulk uploaded to Facebook. And I feel like over time they made that tool easier and easier to use. So once upon a time, you'd be like, oh, one by one. So you were almost forced into the archaic curator role, because you're like, well, just one pic at a time. So is this pic worth the bloody, we were probably on broadband by that point, but, is it worth the traffic up and down to bloody get this photo up? It doesn't matter as much as the other 90 that I've got bulk downloaded from my camera, right? And then they did the mass uploader for Facebook, and then the gloves are off, right? So it's like 100 photos up, and it just makes then looking back a very different experience. Now, it's obvious, like there's no way for me to separate, do I hate that there's hundreds of photos on Facebook of me? Do I hate it because it's of a time in my life when I'm most irresponsible, most illegally drinking, most causing a seed, most closest to becoming an adult, and yet somehow the furthest away, do I hate that there's hundreds of photos of me because it's that moment in my life? Or is there something about just the absolute abundance and global ease of access to such a well-documented moment of my life? Is that where the, lack of chill about it comes from? Because here's what's up. I don't like it. I don't like that there's that many pictures of me on Facebook. And I have been locked in a long process of deleting my own photos off Facebook and then untagging myself in other photos people have taken of me that are on Facebook. And it got me thinking about it, because I'm like, well, if I'm honest, as I'm going through doing this, eradicating and slowly chewing away at my Facebook, because I don't want to lose my account, you honest. Just if I can explain my rationale for a moment, don't want to lose my Facebook account. It's like a email at this point, right? But the photos, get rid of them. I mean, and this is what I'm saying, get rid of them on a globally accessible public now database. I know there's privacy settings, but you understand what I'm saying. They're just out there in the multitudes, and you can go through them at any moment. Whereas what I'm looking for really is to take the best of, take the shots that I really, really like, that mean something, that matter, and maybe put them in a photo album. Maybe make a meal of them, make a deal, I should say. And because you can print off digital photos onto paper as if they were developed. So do that and make a real photo album. Would it change my relationship with those moments, with those photos, with my feeling about wanting to share them? Because ultimately then, I would be able to share them on such a personal basis. But it's just weird that the terms of the nostalgia and the feelings around, taking a journey down memory lane like this, it's amazing how the terms of the conversation have changed because of those, concurrent revolutions of digital and social and all that stuff, right? But the thing is, for me, is that really neatly coincide. I mean, again, probably everybody else, but I produce a lot of digital work. Again, maybe does anybody still work in paper? Is anybody out there who's in a practical vocation? What do you leave behind? Because certainly, from my perspective, I have design files, model files, and music files from my university days. I have massive video files. I have, more design files as I've gone throughout my career. And then, of course, websites on websites on websites. Everything I've ever developed or worked on, I have some copy of the code somewhere. And so theoretically, I can still run these websites from, as long as I've been making them, which is now more than 10 years. And so considering the rate at which I put these things out and the sort of the smallness ultimately of these projects and how they get moved around, much like Facebook, and the fact that I can go to a party from when I was 17 years old and see who I was making out with, and I can just tippity tap that in. Here I am looking at, just a few years later, the website that I was making for the band that I was in at the time. Or indeed, I can listen to that band's music. Or I can, look at the design files for either the cover of the music we were putting out, or maybe subsequently the website. And it's just there. It's just all there. And when you're in this kind of profession where you're asked to, more than just a resume, more than just a CV, collate this work, put it into a portfolio, present it, necessarily some of this work, accessible as it is, becomes relevant to your story of how you got from the beginning of your career to here, your most employable moment of your career where you're hoping to join whatever company, right? Or you're just showing it off. And so every time you move forward, or like I say, even if you just like have a place where people can view your portfolio, necessarily your old work is in there. And for me, it hits those same notes. You've got the nostalgia. You've got the nostalgia for the project itself and the moment itself, but also the context in which you were in, like where your life was at that time, and what kind of person you were, and how that manifested in how you approached work or any other kind of creative output. Like, again, I get to work creatively for my job, but also, just as you're experiencing right now, the creativity tap stays on after work hours. And so even in terms of this podcast, there are episodes unpublished. There are, and I spoke about this last time I talked about, creativity and the why of doing this, but they're in there. So potentially I could, these previous episodes, these unseen clips and cuts. And so, I have options, right? Do I create a Patreon and make it available to only the most enthusiastic of listeners? And does it provide value to them to see this old stuff? Do I watch it myself and, learn from my mistakes, or think, what, that episode that I didn't finish was pretty good after all, give it another go, or rehash it? And certainly when it comes to the portfolio making, and certainly when it comes to development, there is quite an opportunity for rehashing, because you go through this experience. Imagine if you see the photos in the photo album and you're cringed out by yourself from 10, 15 years ago. You look at yourself and you're like, this was a nice day. I remember this moment, and I guess I'm bringing it. I'm obviously having fun in this photo, but if I was telling other people about this, if I was showing them this picture, I just wish, I hadn't quite pulled that face, or, I wish I hadn't gelled my hair up like that, in that extremely embarrassing way. And, I don't have a lot of personal desire to go and change those moments. But then when it comes to portfolio, I do have a lot of desire to do that. And what the opportunity would be is going into those ancient photos of yourself at your most cringy and just being like, hey, if I could just do your hair like this, if I could just switch out this shirt, if I could just change these elements about your presentation at this moment, then I think it's just going to be a better memory when it comes to presenting it to other people. And maybe it'll even make me happier when I check it out myself. So that's a tempting thing to do. And sometimes when you're prepping the portfolio and sometimes when you're revisiting the old work, it's just really cool from a technology perspective to look at it and say, in terms of personal technical development, say, this technology is old. This approach is antiquated. Things have changed, including myself, but also the wider approach. And we can update this and we can do this better. And I jump into those things when it comes to these moments, when it's time to update the portfolio and time to go into the archives. I jump at the opportunity to say, okay, that was how I approached the problem on the day. Save as, and here's how I would approach the same problem today. And so you end up doing what I basically enjoyed so much about web development when I moved away from architecture. What gave me the most attraction and what kept me in the profession really is that with architecture you kind of get one go. You put the building up. And that's why there's so much planning and there's so much training and there's so much work that goes into it at the beginning. But you put the building up and it stays up. Now, obviously, there's extensions and things can remodel over time, of course, right? But you can't go in, dig up just tell everyone in the building to fuck off, number one. Just not need the building for a period of time. Go in, change the foundations, like literally excavate, put new stuff back in, completely reinforce everything, literally from the foundations upwards, and leave the rest of the house intact, like sat on the surface level. Whoops. Sorry, just knocking the microphone in my excitement, but you would be leaving the walls in place in this analogy while you're shifting the foundations. And working with any kind of development, when you're happy with the parts, you're happy with the walls, you're happy with the windows and their placement, but you know that the engine at the core, the foundations of this house, you know that would be better based on what you know now, based on technology that's available now. So to jump into that project, dig down to those foundations, excavate them, completely replace them with your new understanding of technology, and then re-release the site either because it is still live or because you want to present it in some other fashion in your portfolio, right? That can be done almost limitlessly, and it is rewarding every single time to me. I just deeply love this process. And because I love it so much and I want to put it in my portfolio, these projects, and because I'm learning all the time, I'm doing it pretty often. I'm going back and revisiting these projects. And obviously, you don't want to go all the way back to where it's like irrelevant, and you might as well start from scratch because it is so old. But these sort of, like I say, old enough that you look at it and there's some aspect of it that you don't recognize. Or rather, there's elements that you recognize as from the past, that you've changed, that your approach has changed, that your ability has changed. And so it's time to inject that into this project and bring it into your present. And as you do that, inevitably, not just in the code and the development work that goes on from a technical perspective, but also from my perspective, where I've done so many websites for bands and clients that I've worked with who are themselves creative. Of course, you reinvestigate that work and that creative output. And so listening to old music that I myself have worked on or others have worked on whilst I'm reinvigorating these projects, it's giving you that hit of the photo album, journey. You're going back, you're reinvestigating, you're taking a stroll down memory lane, you're putting yourself in that context, But you have the wisdom of today, and you have the wisdom of all the things you know now, and you have the ability to look and listen to this art from your own past and say, yeah, I think that's shit now. Or maybe it's still good, and that's great too. But maybe you can look at it and say, yeah, it's kind of lame now, and I like these other things, and my tastes have changed, and my abilities have changed. And there's not really, a positive or negative. I'm trying not to look through these things and be like, I sucked, and I'm glad I've come a long way, but I was really, shit back then. That's not ever my takeaway. It's just always so rewarding to look at the thing and say, wow, I've moved on from this. I've moved forward. I've changed. I've grown. And then look at the date and be like, oh, that wasn't that long ago. And I've grown so much in such a short space of time, which is kind of the icing on the cake of like learning in this strange secondhand way that you've grown. And that maybe you remember this project, maybe you remember this work, maybe you remember this memory, but you are now far enough removed from it that you can look from that third person perspective and say, oh, I'm not that person anymore. And that's really cool. I hope. I hope that that's the feeling that you get when you look through the photo albums. There's always going to be that sadness that those times are in the past. And the nostalgia moves into the sort of the bittersweet feeling of, well, these things are over. But I think in the same way that we enjoyed, I know my family enjoyed, maybe yours did too, the process of putting together the photo album. I think that's despite the digital onslaught of the modern era. I'm trying to enjoy it in that way, the photo album process way, as I put together my portfolio, as I look through my archives. I'm trying to be more of a curator. And like I say, I'm going through this wonderful experience of being able to say, okay, like creatively, this was a cool thing that I did, but here's how, knowing what I know now, I can take it to the next level. And that ability to time travel, maybe you would like it when it comes to the photo albums. Maybe it would be cool to reach back into history and say, just be a bit more chill, dude. But, it's a very different experience. And I hope that your photo albums show you the moments where you were not working and you were enjoying yourself. And with the portfolio, it's all about, okay, that's the photo album of my social life, but the portfolio album is the photo album of my professional life. And so, that's what I'm going through at the moment. And really enjoying it. And it's adding to this sort of general narrative at this time of being in new and old contexts and all those kind of things. So, we continue our overarching theme of nostalgia, circles turning, disassociation, disconnection, and reconnection. Those are the, just the banner themes that we'll be discussing here on Unclear for the next few episodes, I imagine. And so thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching this episode. If you are a photo albums kind of guy, leave a comment that says photo albums forever. And if you prefer Facebook albums, and in fact you're still making them, then please stop watching this video. Okay, thanks guys. We'll see you next time.